All right, welcome in. Check the mic. It's our draft special, our third weekly special here, and I am thrilled to have my friend Dane Brugler join us here. Dane from The Athletic. Dane, you're one of my favorite draft analysts, if not my absolute favorite. So appreciate you joining me here today.
No, it's humbling to hear. Thanks, Steve.
Tell everybody where they can find all your stuff. I know The Beast is what you're known for, and that comes out in April. So hopefully, we'll have you back closer to the draft. But where can everybody find what you're working on right now?
Yeah, you can find everything on The Athletic. Got a mid-season top 50 board coming out here in a few weeks on Twitter at DP Brugler. But everything's over at The Athletic. And then, of course, The Beast, which will, anybody that hasn't seen it yet, if you like the NFL draft at all, I promise you it's something you need to have, something that you will enjoy going through as we get through this process.
Yeah, I fully endorse The Beast, and we will continue to endorse it as we get closer to draft time here on Check the Mic. So we always start with the quarterbacks, and again, I had Mike Renner on here, Kyle Krabs on here. Just fascinated to hear everybody's top five, especially this year, because I don't know who the best quarterback is in this draft class. So high level, what are your thoughts on this draft class? And then we'll kind of count down from five with your top five currently right now.
It is so wide open right now. Just talking to people throughout the league, asking them, hey, point blank, have you watched a quarterback this year where you came away thinking, oh, that's a first round guy? And I got a few answers that were, well, I guess if you squint, maybe this guy, or a little bit from this game, from this player. But overall, there's not a lot of love in terms of first round grades for these quarterbacks. And that's a very much the opposite of what we saw last year, when going in, we knew Caleb was going to go likely number one. Drake May was going to be up there. Jane Daniels had that rise. JJ McCarthy obviously had his fans throughout the league as being a first round player. And then Michael Penix and Bo Nix were able to sneak in there with the seasons they had this year. Now, obviously, we still have 2 months to go, and the playoff, having a 12-team playoff this year, it is really interesting for this quarterback class because it creates these big moments where a quarterback could have finished strong and have that type of stage that we saw Michael Penix have last year, where that game against Texas certainly helped him going in the top 10. What will this year's playoff bring us in terms of the stages for these quarterbacks, and how much of a factor would that play into the final evaluation? So it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be very fluid. The top five that we're about to talk about is probably going to change just because of what we have left on the schedule and just the way that this quarterback class is kind of clumped together with, well, I like what this guy does, but I like what this guy, there's not one player that stands above the rest as being the guy this year. And I have yet to talk to a player or someone in the league who looks at one of these quarterbacks and says, yeah, no doubt about it, first round grade. If we have a top 10 pick, that's who I would want us to take. Like they're just not that quarterback this year.
Such a good point about the college football playoff and the big games that we're going to get. Already feels like this college football season has had several big games. Even with the devalued regular season, we're still seeing a ton of really good games. Whether they end up meaning a lot at the end of the year with the playoff, I don't know, but there's been some high level games between big time teams so far. So let's do it. Let's get into your top five. Again, caveat being, as of right now, this thing could change weekly. But who's your number five quarterback as we stand here in mid-October?
Right now, this came down to Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers. I went with Carson Beck here at five, just the Georgia quarterback, based off of what he put on film last year. And even though the season has not gone what he was necessarily hoping for, both team goals and his goals, I still think that, he has the baseline traits that, he can make it at the next level. And, with Ewers, this muscle strain that he has, it's clearly affecting him. Sark can say whatever he wants, but it's clear as day. Against Georgia, the Texas quarterback looked like a shell of himself compared to the guy we saw in Ann Arbor earlier this year against a Michigan team that's not very good, but they have a good defense. And going into the big house is not an easy thing to do. Ewers had a big game. But playing through these injuries, that's part of the job description. And so it'll be something worth monitoring closely the rest of the way. Texas goes to Vandy this weekend. That's not the cakewalk. It's been in past years. So just interested to watch these two quarterbacks. Beck, he doesn't have that true distinguishing trait, but he's solid across the board. Processes well from the pocket, plays well in rhythm. He's not he hasn't proven himself to be a second reaction quarterback. He's not really someone you're going to trust to make plays off platform. And turnovers have been a glaring issue for him this season. He's really pressing, and it's affecting his timing. It's affecting his ball placement. Over his first 17 starts at Georgia, he didn't have any multi-interception games. Over his last 4 games, he's had 3 multi-interception games. So it's not that simplistic, but he just doesn't look like the same quarterback that we saw last season with Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey. He's now in the league. And I think that's really showing. And some of those answers that he had last year on film are no longer there. And that's why he, before the season would have been number 1 on this list. Now he's down there at number 5.
That aspect of the human element, the mental element of Carson Beck maybe being QB1 for a lot of people. Was he your QB1 heading into the preseason?
He was, yeah. In my first top 50 board, he was the first quarterback, and I think he was as high as like number 9 overall.
Yeah, we forget sometimes that pressure. I mean, he's a kid who sees that stuff like anyone else. That's part of the job description too, handling success as much as you handle adversity. But all of a sudden you're pressing and trying to live up to that. You can kind of feel that in Beck's game so far, I would say.
Yeah, and when you're driving a Lamborghini around campus, and it's no longer the feel good story. It's like, okay, it's time to perform. And just Georgia team, we saw that defense against Texas. They have as good a chance as any to win it all this year because of that defense. And now a lot of it, the pressure's on Beck to follow through on his end to at least keep them in games so, they can not do what happened against Alabama earlier this year.
All right, who's QB4 right now for you?
Shedeur Sanders, Colorado. Plenty to like about his game. Terrific poise, toughness. He's accurate, especially over the middle. He understands touch and trajectory with his throws. He does some of his best work in high stake moments. So you feel good about just that steady heartbeat that he plays with. My main hang up with Sanders is the way he sets up in the pocket. He backpedals in his drops. He just hangs out there. He'll make his reads. The Kansas State tape, I thought, really showed his issues with this. It led to a lot of sacks, a lot of pressures. If he had more high-level traits, physical traits, I would feel better about him getting away with it. But he's 6'1" and a quarter, 205 pounds. Arm velocity is more B than A. And he's a good athlete, but not explosive, who's going to make a lot of guys miss, especially once he gets to the next level. So does he have the talent to start in the NFL? I think he does. But constricted pockets really disrupt his process. And it's not just the offensive line at Colorado that creates that. His pocket movements directly lead to sacks. And to me, that's the mental roadblock I have with Sanders is his reaction to pressure, the way he operates in the pocket, and he doesn't have a great feel for it. And in the NFL, it's not going to get any easier when he has to negotiate those tight spaces.
It's such an astute point, Dane, because you have the data nerds, as I very nicely say. The data nerds would tell you sacks are a quarterback stat, right? It's far more consistent QB to QB than it is O-line to O-line. And then what you're saying from just a traits and scouting perspective, you can see that, right? His pocket movement's not ideal. When you drift in the pocket, you're losing, your tackles are now losing leverage against their pass blockers. You're making life difficult for them. So the times that he's taken unnecessary hits or even under pressure, it's not as simple as like being on Twitter live during a game, be like, this O-line's trash, the O-line's trash, right? It's way more nuanced than that. And I'm glad that you brought that to the table, that Shedeur is somewhat at fault for a lot of the pressure that he's faced over the last couple of years.
No doubt. And like I said, I would point to that Kansas State game. If anyone can go check out that game, check out that tape. And there was once or twice where he actually did take a step up. And I was okay. He shows that he can do it once in a while, but more times than not, he is setting up shop 10, 11 yards behind the line of scrimmage and going through his reads. And meanwhile, the tackles, they just have no shot to block pass rushers that deep. So, that feeling of where the pressure is coming from, how to negotiate it with your eyes downfield, it's just not something that has come naturally to him up to this point. And, it's one of those one of those traits that doesn't really get better at the next level.
Do you worry with Shedeur Sanders that you could become bulletin board material, Dane? Do you worry at all that having him as QB4 and not 1 will make you bulletin board material?
Well, and I'm not even going to bring up like anything, off the field and like, are you drafting the family? Are you drafting, it just in terms of that whole dynamic, that's something totally separate that we will be talking about ad nauseum throughout the process about what does it mean when you draft Shedeur Sanders and the Sanders family and all of that comes with it. But just strictly talking about on the field, I definitely have my hangups. And I think it's also fair to point out, like, what defense has Colorado really faced that I think helps you learn about Shedeur? Like, the Kansas State defense is probably the best defense that they've faced so far. And that's where a lot of those issues really popped up. So I like Shedeur as a quarterback. I think he can start in the NFL, but and I think it's also worth pointing out, like I mentioned before, these guys are pretty clumped together.
Right.
There's not these huge gaps separating these players, but no, at this point right now, I feel comfortable having him at number 4.
All right. Who's QB3 then?
So I'm going with Cam Ward here, Miami quarterback. He's been a really fun player to watch this season. He's got the arm talent to attack every inch of the field. And it doesn't matter if has a clean pocket, if it's a compromised situation where he has to alter his body movements. He has the arm talent to sling it and get away with it. 6'2", 225 pounds. The mobility that he has lets him find those extra half seconds. He can allow routes to come open. He's a very loose player. And to me, that's part of what makes him dangerous is he's also loose with his decision-making, which directly leads to the turnover-worthy plays, the errant throws, and that's what makes him a tricky eval. And you have to be encouraged by the improvements that he has made in college. In high school, you go all the way back. He was in a wing tee offense in high school. Goes to Incarnate Word at the FCS level. It's a very simplistic air raid scheme. Goes to Washington State, more the same. Miami, with Shannon Dawson as the offensive coordinator, he comes from that air raid family, but it's a little more diverse with what they're asking him to do. The ground game is really their bread and butter, and then you let Cam create these explosives with his arm. But my concern is, can he mitigate the costly mistakes, specifically the turnovers, in order to stay on the field in the NFL? Because I think he's a guy that needs more reps because he has gotten better and better and better every year. He needs that experience, but if, coaches need to be able to trust you at the next level. And so if they can't trust you, they won't play you. And so can he cut down on some of those mistakes at the next level to stay on the field, to get that valuable experience that he needs? I think the bottom line with Ward, the way I would sum it up, he's a fireworks player. He has the arm talent, the elusiveness that's going to help create explosive plays. But fireworks, they have those little warning labels on them, right? So when you're careless with fireworks, negative results can follow. It's kind of the same with Ward. The turnover-worthy plays, his tendency to get careless with his decision-making, that results in negative plays. And, the glass half full side is you bet on the talent, his ability to create the explosives. But when everything gets a lot faster in the NFL, especially compared to, again, bad defenses that he's facing in the ACC, do you trust him to cut down on negative results? That's the tough part of this evaluation.
Has Ward made the biggest jump for you from preseason to right now? Obviously, Miami's playing great, and he's had a fantastic season overall.
No doubt. My issue with Ward has always been the turnover-worthy plays. I mean, Washington State the last 2 years, he just put the ball in harm's way too much.
And crazy ones too, not just like misreading coverage. Like, dude, you can't be throwing back across your body like that.
And we've seen some of that this year at Miami. Right. Not as much, but I think part of it is the offense, the talent around him, and he just doesn't feel the need to do it as much. Now, I mean, some of the stuff he gets away with, and you look at it and it's like, oh, wow, big play. But, it inches away from being a devastating result. So you kind of have to live with both sides of the coin with him. And, he's definitely getting better. And I think that is where the glass half full part comes in because of the improvements he's shown every year. The fact that he's not done learning. He is still figuring things out about the quarterback position. It's just, can he cut down on the mistakes enough where you can keep him on the field in the NFL so he can get that valuable experience and you can kind of ride through the rough patches to get to the other side where you hopefully believe he can be, a impact starting quarterback for you.
All right, well, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, they're number 1 and 2 for a lot of people right now. They're 3 and 4 for you. So who's number 2 right now for you?
Jalen Milroe, Alabama quarterback. And look, I think this comes down to a lot of NFL teams. They're going to look at the quarterback position and boil it down to this basic tenet. Give me the guy who makes it really hard to play defense. Jalen Milroe has that kind of talent. 6'1", 225 pounds, 4.40 speed. In terms of velocity as a passer, at top shelf, almost elite. Outstanding physicality as a runner, both as a runner and then I would say in the pocket as well, where he can shake off that pressure, that contact that he's going to see in the pocket. He does a nice job attacking defenses. Sometimes he's just taking what the defense gives him. Other times he is pushing the ball downfield. All we have to do is watch that first half against Georgia to see what Milroe did against a really good defensive team. So is he still undeveloped in areas? There's no doubt. Ball placement is good, but it needs to be better. Again, another player where we've seen him take steps every single year. This past weekend, the Tennessee tape, frequently missed high. But Milroe's a prospect that it's never been about the short-term fix with him. It's never, okay, we're going to bring him in. He's going to, if I'm an NFL team, we're not bringing him in so he can light the NFL on fire as a rookie. I mean, it's more of a long-term bet, because you're betting on high-end traits, mental maturity, and trusting the coaching staff to get the rest out of them.
How special do you think Milroe is as a runner? We have Lamar Jackson, the greatest running quarterback of all time. I would say Jaden Daniels already looks like maybe the best scrambling quarterback of all in the league right now, right? It's just feel and burst and acceleration. Like, where does Milroe fit, do you think, as far as the best of the best go?
He's got to be up there because he could be a full-time running back if he wanted to. Because he does have that 225-pound frame, and he will run through contact. His acceleration is so immediate. So if there's a hole there, he will hit it. It doesn't take him long to get through the hole, get to the second level, and he's not a guy you want to see if you're a safety at the second level. So that's definitely part of why if Jalen Milroe ran a 4.8, he wouldn't be number 2 on this list. But he runs a 4.40. He might get in the 4.3s. He's that type of athlete. And again, it comes down to, if you're a defense and you have to prepare for this, this is not the type of guy you want to see because of the different ways he can beat you with his athleticism, his arm. And again, I think that we've seen him get better and better and better on the field compared to what we saw last year, now this year. And there's going to be ups and downs. We saw this weekend against Tennessee. But again, I think, think about Anthony Richardson. Jalen Milroe has already done more on the field in college than Anthony Richardson ever did at Florida. Richardson was taller, but in terms of the arm, in terms of the build, that's where they're kind of similar. And with, I actually compare Milroe to Jalen Hurts. And it really, if you combine Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson, the result would kind of look something like Jalen Milroe. And so there's still a lot of projection involved. It's a long-term bet, but if you're going to bet on a guy with talent, Milroe's got a lot of that.
All right, man, you're really high on Milroe. Last question on him really quick. The rest of the league as high, or people you're talking to around the league, high on Milroe compared to you?
I always get the same couple responses. It's always, well, if Anthony Richardson could go top 5, why can't him? It's stuff like that. And I think it's easy to bet on talent. And, all it takes is one team to see it that way. And I think Milroe has that talent. I think, what he brings just with the mental maturity that I mentioned, that's a big part of this as well. I mean, he's very grounded. When watching or talking to a scout who was at the Alabama-Georgia game, he was purposely looking at the sidelines as that game was unfolding at halftime. He told me on the Georgia sidelines, no juice. Beck's sitting by himself on the bench, no juice. He looked at Alabama sideline, and Milroe's the guy, first one, welcoming guys off the field, talking to defensive guys, dapping them up, doing all these different things. And obviously in that moment when Alabama's leading compared to Georgia, it's easy to, kind of micromanage that. But this is a player that I think has a lot of the stuff that behind the scenes or the things that you can't look at on paper that or in the stat sheet that Milroe brings to your roster, to your offense. I think teams will be excited about that.
All right, Dane, then who is QB1 for you right now?
So, right, again, all these guys are pretty closely ranked. There is not one that is clearly above
This
the
is
other.
Future Hall of Famer, hands down, gold jacket coming. Who is it?
Garrett Nussmeier, LSU. Not something I expected to say 3 months ago, but of all the quarterbacks I've studied so far, he's the best at understanding all the details of how to play the position. Now, obviously, his dad, longtime quarterback coach and offensive coach at different levels of football. He grew up in this. He's a very composed passer. I love his short memory, too. He will make a mistake, come back, and keep firing. Very short memory. Anticipates well, especially over the middle of the field, digs and breakers. Clean, compact release. Is able to feel and negotiate pressure. That's probably what I love the most about him. It's kind of the opposite of Shedeur. What I love, his ability to feel with his eyes downfield. He can feel everything going on around him. He can gravitate towards space. And it's really impressive when he has 8 starts to his name. This isn't a guy that's a 3-year starter. He has 8 starts at the college level. And, you mentioned before how sacks can be a quarterback stat. He's been pressured 65 times this year. He's playing behind a good offensive line, but they've had their warts this year as well. Even Will Campbell at left tackle, who I think is the best offensive lineman in college football, he's been beaten a few times. 65 pressures this year for Nussmeier. He's taken 1 sack. Wow. 1 sack. That's an insane stat. And that speaks to his ability to feel everything going on around him, get the ball out, extend plays when he needs to. There's 2 main areas I want to see him improve on this year. The deep ball, often he's leading guys too far. And then secondly, not taking as many 50-50 chances. I think both these are things that he will get better at with more experience and just understanding when to take his chances, when not to, how to settle down that deep ball. I think he can get there. I see a lot of Tony Romo with this player, the mannerisms, the release. I would say Nussmeier has a little bit better mobility and a stronger arm, but just the style of quarterbacking, very similar. And again, he grew up around the game with his dad being a longtime coach. I think that shortens the learning curve a little bit. It also explains how he can take hard coaching. He steps up in those clutch moments. So I'm going to be interested with Nussmeier too, just what decision he makes after this year. He's a 1-year starter. If he comes out, I think he's going to be in that first round discussion with a few of these other quarterbacks we've talked about. And it just comes down to preference. There's not going to be any consensus from team to team on these guys. It just comes down to, how the interviews go and how each team, looks at their situation and the different skill sets that these quarterbacks offer. But if he goes back to LSU, I think he's in the Heisman. He's the Heisman front runner next year. He's going to be in the mix to be a high pick. It's almost following the same script as Joe Burrow and Jane Daniels did at LSU. So, what decision will he make? And another factor in this is LSU is bringing in a number 1 high school quarterback this year. And in the days of NIL, that doesn't happen cheap. So how does that affect what decision he makes? So, yeah, Nussmeier has been very impressive this year. Even if all of the stats don't bear it out, the tape and the way he's operating, his process has been really impressive.
I feel like every quarterback has like their own staple highlight reel throw or types of throws that stick in your head. And for Jaden Daniels, it was the slot fade. Caleb Williams, you picture him throwing on the run. For Nussmeier, it's that anticipation over the middle of the field, that game-tying touchdown against Ole Miss. I mean, isn't that Nussmeier's game?
Yeah, it really is. He has such a good feel for and really just trust that his guys are going to be where they're supposed to be. And he's letting it rip before the receivers are out of their break, before they're looking, and the ball is there for them. So he's, again, playing behind an offensive line that's pretty good. He has weapons to throw to. But his ability to attack downfield has been really impressive. So, and it's not all perfect, again, but I think his process is what really stands out as, okay, he knows how to do the, quote unquote quarterback things. And that's what really stands out. That's why I think, if I had to pick any of these quarterbacks right now as being the top quarterback, I'd probably lean Nussmeier.
All right, man, that's great discussion on the QBs. You mentioned Quinn Ewers, maybe just outside the 5 for you. Is there anyone else to just keep an eye on? And I loved your point earlier in the show when you said, look, the college football playoff is going to give us way more games. Like there's a lot more to come with these guys. But anyone else that we should keep an eye on here down the stretch?
Penn State's undefeated, and Drew Aller feels like he's been a bit part of that for sure. He has played well. Ohio State's coming up on the schedule for them. How does he play against his home state team? That'll be big. Among the seniors, Riley Leonard, it's been a struggle with him just because I love the makeup that he has. I love the athleticism. I need to see NFL throws on your tape. I need to see it. And he finally was able to get over 200 yards passing in a game last week, which was good to see. That's progress. But how does Notre Dame finish? Because they're going to be in the mix for a possible playoff spot. And a guy to keep in mind that Syracuse isn't going to be in the playoff picture, but Kyle McCord. I think a lot of teams are really going to like Kyle McCord because, again, he does a lot of the quote-unquote quarterback things that you need to do at the next level. And so don't be surprised if Kyle McCord goes a lot earlier than people think.
All right, man. Love that. Good QB discussion, as I said. I'm trying to get everybody to highlight some names, some sleepers. And, we're calling them sleepers, but it could just be players you're higher on, players that we just need to know here in mid-October, whose names we might hear a lot more come March or April. So who are some of the guys that you're looking at right now?
Yeah, and obviously it's tough with the term sleepers because it's hard to keep track of who's being talked about, who's not. So I try to come up with names that aren't being talked about a whole bunch. Gray Zabel, offensive lineman for North Dakota State. That program breeds these guys. The Bison, they've had 3 offensive linemen drafted the last 4 years. Zabel's next up in the pipeline. The tape says he's a day 2 pick. You talk to the coaches at North Dakota State, they'll tell you he's a first rounder. They absolutely love him. But I think he's comfortably in that day 2 mix. Teams love that he has experience across the line. He's played primarily at tackle. He was a right tackle last year, left tackle this year, but he has experience at guard, has experience at center. I won't completely rule out him staying outside at tackle, but his best projection in the NFL is inside at guard or center, 6'5.5", 305 pounds. The arms are going to be closer to 32 inches than they are 33 inches. But really good feet, flexibility, finishes with violence. He loves to stun, snatch defenders. Sometimes he'll throw his hands a little too quickly and gives rushers kind of a window to attack him. But for the most part, he has just dominated FCS competition.
If he's not necessarily a tackle, I mean, it feels like a weak tackle class, especially compared to last year and especially at the top. Is there any chance he's going to get a shot there just because of the rest of the class?
I think probably the All-Star season will tell us that, right? Whether it's a Shrine Bowl or Senior Bowl, where is he? Where do they line him up? Where does he play? And I think that will tell us a lot more because I think you're absolutely right. This is not a great tackle group, teams need tackles, so they will give him the benefit of the doubt until they won't be able to. So doesn't have the length that you're going to want, but he has the mentality. He has the athleticism. We saw a guy like Cody Mock, who was a tackle at North Dakota State, move inside. And I think that's likely the most realistic scenario for Zabel.
All right, give us another name to know right now, whether it's called a sleeper or not. I'm with you on the names. It's tough. It's just a name to know right now here in October.
Jared Ivey, defensive lineman from Ole Miss. That Ole Miss front can really get after it. And Ivey has been
they're really good.
And he's taken a big jump this year. He came back for another season, 6'5.5", 285 pounds, 34-inch arms. He's actually a basketball-focused athlete most of his life. Through high school, he had D1 offers to play basketball, Coastal Carolina, a few other places. But he switched to football. He realized, okay, I'm not going to be a center in the NBA, so let's focus on football. Goes to Georgia Tech. He was actually the number 2 ranked recruit that year for Georgia Tech behind Jahmyr Gibbs. So they had a pretty nice 1-2 in that class. Unfortunately, both ended up transferring. He goes to Ole Miss, and he's just gotten better each season the last 3 years. Big athlete, long levers. He's really maturing on the field in terms of just understanding how to use those gifts to be a more efficient pass rusher. Not quite as explosive as, say, like a Keon White, who was actually his teammate at Georgia Tech for a year. But in terms of body type, style of play, there are some similarities there.
I was going to use, I may have written down Keon White in my notes watching him, not even because of the Georgia Tech connection, just because of how much power he shows on certain plays. Like he will just absolutely wreck some offensive tackles. And you are right. That Ole Miss defensive front with Princely off the edge and JJ Pegues, and I mean they are loaded on that defensive
line. Walter Nolan,
yeah. I love that Ole Miss defensive line. Give me another name. Who else you got?
Running back. This is gonna be a fascinating running back class. Such a stacked group with all these juniors coming out. But I'm gonna go with the senior Woody Marks from USC. And because of just the volume of running backs we're gonna see this year, there could be some good backs that fall a little further than they should. Marks could be one of those guys. Runs low and tough. Love the run balance. Like his feet, his jump cutting ability. It almost looks like a slalom skier weaving through traffic on the inside. And then his hands out of the backfield, probably the best thing that he does, that pass catching element. Obviously he was at Mississippi State before he transferred over to USC. Last year, the guy, Ray Davis was the guy that was if I need a running back, 4th round, that's who I'm taking. This year, Marks is that guy. Can do a little bit of everything. Not going to be your running back 1 on the depth chart necessarily, but can do a little bit of everything and the type of player I want on my roster.
Yeah, Ray Davis, a good shout, already making an impact with the Bills. I was at the game last year, Dane, when he went for 280 against Florida. So if you ever get biased when you're in a game, you're not supposed to be, but like when you're there, when you see it, that messes with your brain a little bit. So Ray Davis was on my radar just because I was there when he went for 280.
That was the best. That was one of the best, if not the best, running back tape that any running back had in last year's draft was what he did against Florida. Running the ball, catching the ball. No, You're absolutely right.
He was outstanding. All right, man, give me one more name to watch here.
So I'm going to go out to the West Coast in Oregon. Bryce Betcher, linebacker. The best player on that Oregon defense is Derek Harmon. He looks like a top 50 pick, maybe a first rounder. The most underrated member of that defense is Betcher, who I think is turning himself into a day 2 pick. And I mean, obviously, you're really going to appreciate his background. Gold Glove outfielder for the Ducks baseball team. The Astros drafted him in the 13th round this summer. They kind of had a handshake agreement. Hey, go play your senior year of football, and then you'll join the organization. I don't know, man. He looks awesome. He looks like he's a possible NFL starter type of guy. And so it's going to be really interesting. And he was a baseball guy first. He joined the football team a couple years ago. Last year, he got some more playing time, moved from safety to linebacker. This year, it's just all coming together for him. Speed, range, instincts. He makes plays in coverage. He'll work downhill, tackles for loss. I think it's one of the best stories in this draft class. I don't really see anybody talking about him, but the big question will be, does he stick with baseball or could the NFL sway him? And that's maybe why he's not being talked about more. But I think he has a chance to go in the top 100 picks, and that might be enough to sway him to choose football, at least for the short term until maybe he goes back to baseball. Or I don't know. It's going to be interesting how this all plays out. But Betcher is definitely a name that more people need to be talking about.
No, I do love that story, Dane. That's a good one. I mean, yeah, he flies around the field, as you said. Love his eyes in coverage. You can kind of see the safety in him playing linebacker with some of the plays he's made in coverage. So, and hasn't played a ton this year either, kind of platooning a little bit. So yeah, there is some room to grow there. I love that as a name to watch. So now I'm keeping it consistent every week here, and I'm asking everybody about, I think, obviously the top draft story, I would say, which is Travis Hunter, but just one of the best draft stories in recent years. We've never had somebody do what he does. I mean, I'm still blown away that he's a full-time 2-way player in college, and right off the back of Shohei Ohtani literally being a 2-way player and a Hall of Fame caliber player on both sides. Can we see something similar in the NFL? So what is Travis Hunter's NFL future? Where would you play him? What are your overall thoughts on Hunter?
He's just different. It looks like he's playing at a different speed than everybody else on the field. And I mean that both athletically and mentally. Outstanding football IQ. He trusts his instincts. So there's no thinking out there. It's all reacting. And he deserves so much credit for, I mean, not just the stamina to play both ways, but I don't think he gets enough credit because I don't think people understand the commitment that it takes, the focus, the intelligence to handle both these responsibilities. You have to know the offense front and back. You have to know the defense. You have to spend time in the receiver meeting rooms. You have to spend time with the defensive coaches. He plays some special teams too. So, I mean, there's a reason why this is so rare. Yeah, I mean, you have to be a super athlete, and those guys are rare, but you also have to be super committed just because of the mental side. It's extremely taxing as well. So that's a big part of this. As for how he's, in terms of the next level, I think the first thing for NFL teams, they have to find out straight from Hunter, which position does he prefer? I know he's going to say both. He wants to try both. But understanding his mindset will be just an important part of this. So there won't be any problems later based off of what happens. My guess is that, he would want to be a receiver. That's, most guys want the ball in their hands. They want to score touchdowns. The contracts, being thrown around for receivers are higher. But, I think when you look at the NFL, there's no such thing as a two-position player in the NFL. Now some guys will have a primary position and then some have a secondary position, but there's no player with two primary positions. Right. So if I'm an NFL team within, range of, if I'm a top 10 pick and I'm considering drafting him, I would do my best to convince Hunter, all right, your primary position is corner. It's just harder to find those guys, the athleticism, the smarts, the ball skills. And then the compromise is you tell Hunter, look, we want you to be an every down corner, but we're going to give you 15 to 20 plays each game on offense and try to sell that to him and see if it works. But, it'll be interesting as we get closer to the draft. And as these conversations happen, if it becomes increasingly clear to teams that, hey, if he has to choose, he wants to stay on offense. And obviously that changes things a little bit. So, yeah, the Travis Hunter conversation, it's going to be at the forefront of draft talk for the next 6 months because he has a chance to be the number 1 overall pick. He's going to be very high for everybody, and especially in a draft where we don't have that obvious QB1, he could be the first player drafted. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but I do think if you're going to draft him, especially that high with the top 3 pick, you have to have a plan in place just to make sure that the player is comfortable, make sure that your team is comfortable. And so that'll be at the forefront of a lot of these conversations moving forward.
So that's where most of my guests, and that's where I've landed, right? Corner first, and then change of pace type of wide receiver. I don't know if it's just because that's what we've seen before. His head coach, Deion Sanders, did it. Woodson did it in college. That's where we've
easier too, right? Because it's hard. It would be much harder to say, okay, you're a full-time receiver, and then we'll give you, 15, 20 plays on defense. Like that would control it,
right? You don't know how much nickel you're going to play, and you control the offensive output a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. Exactly. So it seems a lot more feasible to do it that way. But again, if anybody's going to pull it off, it's this guy. But, we've seen right now, he's, Travis Hunter's banged up a little bit. Just it takes a toll on your body playing so many snaps, even on offense where, you're only going to get tackled, say 7 times at most a game, but it's still just the physical exertion and the physicality that you're playing with as a blocker and running routes. And so it would be a long shot for him to play both ways. But if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be him.
The one thing that Kyle Krabs brought up last week as well that I hadn't been considering was just if you have injuries on your team, he's immediately a fill-in in 2 spots. And having that conversation, like if he was on the Rams this year and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua go down, it's like, all right, man, you might have to be full-time receiver. I mean, they have cornerback injuries too, but you know what I mean? Like you can have a plan, but also the ability to deviate from that plan and almost fill 2 roster spots, I think does bring extra value. Which brings me to the mailbag. We have 3 quick mailbag questions, and the mailbag for us is our Discord channel. So make sure you join the Check the Mic Discord, link in the description. But Aaron in the Discord is asking something along these lines here. Are we overvaluing these two-way players? And you mentioned Travis Hunter being banged up a little bit. Is his frame a concern? And so are we overvaluing the fact that he can play receiver and corner at a high level? Would it be better if he was elite at one? Is he elite at both? Are we overvaluing this whole concept right now?
I mean, it's the fact that he can play both ways is not why he's a top 3 pick. It's the fact that he is a big time athlete, the ball skills, the intelligence, that more so than anything else. If he only played corner, he'd still be a top 3 pick, in my opinion. If he only played receiver, I think maybe not a top 3 pick, but I still think he'd be a top 10 pick because, he's 6 foot, about 180 pounds. So he has decent height, especially if you're going to play him a corner. The lanky body type. I mean, that's the way he's built. He does not have a lot of bulk on him. It's very lean muscle. And so there is a concern there in terms of playing a physical position like corner on defense. But I don't think it's necessarily the two-way player. Does it help? Sure. The more you can do, if you have a guard that has experience playing center, great. The more you can do, is something that's always going to help you. But it's more the fact of his skill set. Even if you're only going to play him at one position, that is the reason we're talking about him at this level.
All right, 2 questions kind of related here, but it's our weekly question, and it's about Ashton Jeanty, of course, the running back from Boise State. How high? Both 2 guys in the Discord dubbed the pass rush Stan and Cheesehead, both asking basically how high can you take Ashton Jeanty in this draft?
I think it would be fascinating if he were in the draft 2 years ago with Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
Where would he have gone? Would he have been up there with Bijan to be the first running back drafted? Would he have been clearly the number 2 guy ahead of Gibbs? Would he have been third? Like I think that there would not be a clear consensus answer from the team to team. I think some teams might have had him 1 over Bijan. Other teams probably would have had him 2. Others might have even had him 3. So I think that but the fact that he's in that conversation, 2 guys, both Gibbs and Bijan were top 12 picks. So we're talking about a guy that has the chance to go that early in top half of round 1, chance to go in the top 10. Now the fact that this is a deep running back class, how will that factor in? Every team's going to look at this a little bit differently in terms of what's the positional value of the running back position. Jeanty just does a little bit of everything. And, his pass catching is what he does best of all. And you rarely, when you watch clips or, highlights of Jeanty, you rarely even see him doing that. It's mostly him breaking tackles. Now, will some teams ding him for playing at Boise State? Absolutely. But again, 12-team playoff, I'm rooting for Boise State. Yeah. I want to see Ashton Jeanty on the big stage going up against an SEC defense just to see what he can do on that type of stage. But, going back to my running back preview that I had over the summer in July, Jeanty was one of my favorite players that I watched this summer. Easy running back 1. One of my favorite players in this draft. And so far this year, he has not disappointed. He's just, in terms of, people will point out, oh, well, can you really take a 5'8" running back? That it helps him. The fact that he's 5'8" is a good thing. He's built low to the ground, helps him break tackles. He can hide behind blockers and use his athletic gifts to go make plays. Holds up well in pass pro. Again, his best thing is probably his pass catching ability. So just the total package of what he offers is immediately going to help an offense. Teams will be split, though, on drafting a running back that early. Some won't consider it. Others will be more open-minded to it. But Jeanty is the type of guy that you really force yourself to have those conversations, whether or not it's worth taking a running back that early.
So that brings me to the final question from Just Not Himbert in the Discord. And it's about positional value. And do you care, Dane, about positional value? That really shows up when you're putting together a draft board. So how much are you actually weighing that when you put together a board or a round projection?
I mean, you have to, right? I mean, it's not, if you have a center that you really love, you can't put him number 1 overall, right? Because that's just not how it works. So positional value, whether consciously or subconsciously, it factors in for everybody. Others might be a little more religious in terms of how married they are to positional value than others. I think it's a case by case basis. I'm not going to paint with a broad brush. It just depends on, take Ashton Jeanty, for example. In most cases, I'm not drafting a running back in the top 15 picks, just especially in a draft like this, where I know I can have value 2nd, 3rd round and get a really good running back. But what's my team look like? Do we feel like we're a really good running back away from taking that next step in our where our team is? So there's so many factors here in terms of value of position and where you feel comfortable drafting those guys. At the end of the day, the number one goal is just how are we going to make our roster better? How are we going to take that next step? And If that means drafting, a left guard, then I would have no problem doing that in the middle of round 1 if that's what's going to take our team to the next level. So it's just, there's a lot of different factors here, and every team's going to be a little bit different.
Love it. Great discussion, Dane. Appreciate it, man. That was fun. That was about right. About 45 minutes. Got through a bunch of stuff, and
perfect.
It's still so early, right? A lot to play for the rest of the season. But again, remind everybody where they can read all your work over at The Athletic.
Yeah, again, on Twitter at DP Brugler, and then everything's at The Athletic, all my draft stuff, weekly articles. Again, a new top 50 coming out here in a few weeks. I think it's going to look wildly different than my initial top 50 back in the summer. A lot of movement, a lot of different guys being talked about. So I'm not even sure what it looks like yet, but it's going to be fun to put together.
I love it, man. We're in the heart of it, right? There's a lot more football to be played, a lot of movement. So again, appreciate you joining us, and we'll definitely do it again closer to the draft back in April.
All right, can't wait. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Dane.